What's going on, guys? Welcome to Steve Does Stuff. I'm Steve, and today we are going to be putting a handbrake in the 1JZ foxbody. The last time you saw this thing was the first time I actually got it out to shake it down at a drift event. So Rhett and I went to North Stage, a local drift event which is held at kind of a derelict airport, which was pretty sick. Got the car out, it was ripping. Feeling pretty good, but as always, there's room for improvement. One of which is probably a proper alignment. This thing was doing some funky things. Oh, lose it. But one thing I can definitely do right now is put a handbrake in it because it don't have one. And the handbrake I got for it, bit of a special treat. This little guy right here is FDF Race Shop's Corvette reverse pull style handbrake. Couple things, that's not a Corvette, and not everybody may know who FDF Race Shop is. So they are a motorsports parts company started by Josiah Felice out of Belleville, Ontario, Canada, my hometown. And they have been blowing up in recent years. They signed on with Drift HQ. He does a lot of stuff with Adam LZ. And most importantly, they build gangster shit. They built my angle kit for my E46 BMW, and that thing was the ultimate cheater kit. It worked so well, it was tough as nails. When it broke, they replaced it, no questions asked. They're great. So while they don't make a kit for the Fox body, which is unfortunate, I'm not sure I want to go that crazy with it, but I know they make great shit. And this is what I have chosen for the handbrake. As I mentioned, this is a Corvette style handbrake kit. And the main reason I bought it was I like the mounting bracket. I know this thing has a custom tunnel. It's got a very flat tunnel in there. So I know I can use this to mount the tunnel. And it's reverse style. So it's gonna make sure this master cylinder is out of the way of like the general center console. Normally on Fox bodies, your shifter is gonna be right here because you got the JZ in here and the 300ZX transmission. Our shifter is all the way back here. I could have done a pull-up style handbrake. I personally don't like those. I like having the handle right here because everything that you need is within, you know, a couple inches. Get your wheel, get your handbrake, you got your shifter, not going all the way down here. I'm very aware that a pull-up style is totally fine. I would get used to it, all that good stuff. This is just personal preference. I wanted a pull style handbrake. I like it better. I think it looks cooler, so that's what I'm doing. With this being a more street drift car, I don't want it to be as crazy and like master cylinder, like crazy shit all over the place. I would rather just have this very nice little handle sticking up with all of this crap hidden. So that's why I went for it. Let's get started taking apart the interior, marking this thing, getting it all set up, ready to go. Now this car being as heavily swapped and modified as it is, doesn't really have a stock trans tunnel. And that is very evident because when you look at it, you go, hey, you can tell by the way that it is, you know. If I'm being honest, I can't weld to save my life. And I would like to be able to remove the handbrake if I had to, for whatever reason. Maybe I'm taking the interior of the car, maybe something's happened, I don't know. I don't want it permanently attached to the car. So I can't weld, so I'm not welding it in. I am not bolting it up from the bottom because there's a transmission in the way. So I am going to be putting this in with some M8x1 nut certs and a riv nut gun. So it's gonna take a little while, but I've already got one mocked up in here. So this is like the general template of where this thing's gonna go. I've already placed my first nut in here. I've marked all the holes, so I'm gonna go ahead, hit these with a punch and continue to put these down in place. The handle is like very roughly put together. Everything's loose, it's not a big deal because I wanna get this bottom plate bolted in place first. Then I'm gonna take the handle off, leave the master cylinder and everything in here and start cutting and fitting this center console. Because God damn it, I paid for a center console. I want a center console back in there. I hate the way this thing looks without it. So there's gonna be a lot of cutting and fitting. And the last time I tried this on my BMW, I just ended up basically breaking it because there wasn't a lot left. But I'm older, I'm wiser. at the very least I'm older, so I'm gonna try this again to make it look and fit super nice. Hopefully I can hide most of it underneath the plastic. I think the main issue I'm gonna be up against, which I didn't really anticipate, is the height of those pivot points on the handle. So I think these guys are gonna stick up kind of, or have to be cut into the console. You can see they got some pretty beefy heims there and a piece of threaded rod for that pivot point. I mean, this thing just looks so sick. But I think these are gonna kind of stick up into that console. If you remember, there's just like a black trim piece. This is where the shifter should be. And she ain't there no more. So if nothing else, it's gonna be a cool phone holder. That's gonna work. Yep, that's gonna work. This one's coming up and out. Ow. Wow. Tried to utilize all of the holes on the handbrake that I could. And aside from one that kind of bolts in on the side here, which unfortunately is just a little too far away from this tunnel, everything is looking great so far. So I'm gonna try and nutsert these bad mamma jammas in here, and with a nutsert gun that doesn't work very well, it's gonna be a long process. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Squish 1, squish 2. Still pretty loose. God, that was a real fight with the nutsert gun. Borrowed one from Rhett and it was destroyed already. I actually only got one in with his gun, and I had to call up Jeffrey and get a new one off the Jungle website. But this is what this thing looks like now. Super nice, super solid. Obviously the mounts, my mounts aren't totally tight for the heims, and this is just in here loosely, but I'm loving the placement of this thing. It's gonna look pretty sweet. It's nice and solid in here. And the best part is removable as long as I don't nuke a nutsert. So caution is the name of the game. So unfortunately, the only thing really stopping me from mounting this is this damn fitting. This is a 7/16 20 thread fitting. And if you know anything about these bastards, they are not very common. So I bought this Allstar Performance kit because I thought it came with 7/16 20 banjo bolts. Turns out it came with metric banjo bolts. So I ordered the correct ones. So to kill time, I am going to cut that console up so we can fit this bad dog in here. This is my first attempt at a test fit. We certainly got further than we did last time. We're getting close, but I'm gonna have to cut out these areas. And then the master cylinder behind here is just like really jamming up against things. So I'm going to delete that panel right here, cut out a couple reliefs, and then I'm hoping this thing should just drop right into place, which would be super sick. A lot of cutting, a lot of measuring, a lot of dremeling went into this. Kept the original console, hid everything down in there. And aside from it sitting just a little funky, it's gonna be a little wonky, especially when we get a bolt in there. If I decide to put a bolt in. She's looking really nice. Driver's side isn't quite as clean because, you know, I was using a permanent marker and, well, you know, we missed a few spots, but overall it's looking good. This thing fits in here pretty nicely. I still wanted it to partially cover the master on here. This overall doesn't seem like it's going to be too intrusive for street driving just because it's so nice and tucked up into that console. This is in a really nice position, just a whoosh. All right, so the saga continues. I went back on Amazon, ordered the same kit again, but in the right thread pitch, 7/16 by 20 thread pitch, and it fits perfectly. So this is actually what the kit gets you. It's 2 lines, 2 of these, and that will be the input for a handbrake. Goes out, it transitions to a hard line, which I've kind of done here. And I'm just building some more of the hard lines to go for the output for this. I have never built brake lines with a vise before. I've only kind of just like flailed around on the ground and done it. So much better. So I have 3/16 inch line, which should match the line that's on here. This is left over from when I put the handbrake in the BMW like 2017. So this just goes to show you, these 2 scraps of brake line, I have carried these around 3 different houses, 5 years roughly, and hey, I finally used them. So now I'll save myself 20 bucks. Now before I even try to put the handbrake in, I've got it all mocked up. I've got the lines there. I'm gonna dry fit it and bend all of the lines to poke it out into the firewall. I gotta take care of this. We got a real stripper of a bleed screw. So this is as far away from the master cylinder as possible. This is the passenger rear. And I'm only doing this now because I saw it earlier on a once over of the car. And the last time I installed a handbrake, I snapped a bleed screw and that was that. So, trying to learn from my lessons, I'm going to try and break this guy loose. I have a replacement bleed screw here. I don't know if it's gonna work. I got PB, I got vice grips, and I'm just praying to God it's gonna work. Okay, let's see here. Oh my God, it worked. So there is the rear brake line, runs all the way into the car, up through the fender, bam, right here. I'm gonna mock up the handbrake inside. So that is bolt it to the tunnel, put the lines on it that I have for it, bend those lines, and get them to come out right there. Once I have them there, go back through, check all of my lines to make sure they're nice and tight. Then I'm going to undo that compression fitting on that rear brake line, bend it, put it on the inlet for the wheel-wood, and then hopefully the fluid's not pissing everywhere. I pump it until there's fluid come out of the outlet. Then I will hook up the compression fitting to the outlet line of the wheel-wood, and bam, I've intercepted the rear brake line, got that hydro. Hopefully bleeding won't be too much of a nightmare. The reason I'm doing it this way is I really just want to keep all the brake fluid like away from the plastics and the carpets and everything like that. And as long as these fittings don't leak, I should be good. I am gonna start climbing around in this car and trying to screw this handbrake down, get everything in place, run these lines, and have them poke out right here. Let's do it. All right, we got our lines coming out here. This is my intake. This is my outlet. This is intake. This is gonna be outlet. So if you just kind of ignore all of the wires and the electronics super close to it that are in a rather disorganized fashion, I'll call your attention to the front of the screen where I have my inlet and my outlet for this thing. So I have cranked all of the connectors from the soft line to the hard line, and I will do so again. These fittings are all loose, but my next steps are crank down these two fittings right here, double check my soft line to hard line is good, and then I'm gonna start bending, snipping, cutting, mucking about, and start tapping into these lines and make this car a paperweight. Okay, so my outlet lines are good. Everything on the master cylinder or the handbrake is good. All of the mounts to it were good, but what ended up leaking was the course fitting that was hardest to get to. Went with the standard flare fitting, so I'm gonna try and do a double flare and just see if this seats properly, because I was like cranking and cranking and cranking, it just wouldn't seat. So, all right, update. It worked. The double flare worked. So here's my compression fittings that are here. All of these guys are dry, which is mint. All these guys super nice and dry. This is my improvised power bleeder 5000. Seemed to work pretty well. This baby is installed. All of our fittings are in. Handbrake is bled. We got good feeling on the handbrake. We got good feeling on the pedal. We're gonna still need to top up our fluid a little bit, but now we're gonna start kind of just putting together this thing again, tightening down the handbrake, all that fun stuff. So let's get to it. This is exactly what this is going to look like. So you're still going to see the bolt through there. I got to get a cover for this thing. This is just horrible. I'm thinking like a nice little Crown Royal bottle or something just to poke through there. But regardless, this is what we're dealing with. Doesn't look too bad. So you can see it's still not 100% level here, which I mean is unfortunate, but I don't want this thing to be all hacked away and weird and ugly looking because it's already kind of janky enough. That doesn't work. So, back to the race home. Things don't always go to plan. That nutsert is preventing this shifter from getting over into first and second. So that means I don't have first and second gear. I only had third gear, so I just limped this thing around the neighborhood to get back. Brakes are horrible still. I absolutely need to bleed those. That can be fixed, but we got to do something about this guy because the car no worky right now, and that's bad. All right, so it's many months later, and I stopped filming. So what happened with the shifter? Because this thing is heavily swapped, and you could almost call it fabric cobbled, what was attaching the shifter was a very long bolt with a lug nut, not a nut, a lug nut. So this lug nut was so big that when you rocked the shifter over and tried to put it into first, it would just hit the nutsert. So I think it was the day before LZ World Tour. We had to crew for Samet, me, Rhett, and Mike, and my buddy Chris. So I was scrambling. I had to get this car there. So I basically started bolt checking it. I threw the new shifter parts on it, gave it a once over, and then at like 11 at night, just blasted to Cayuga. Worked the whole event with Samet and everybody. It was fantastic. Drove back to Toronto to Belleville the next day for the LZ World Tour kind of private event. That nice little secret session that they had going on there. Then a couple weeks later, drove the car back to Cayuga to crew for Rhett. Ended up street drifting it there. Most important thing is handbrake is in and it looks pretty mint. Point being, it worked great. Handbrake works mint. The car worked mint. I street drove it probably about 700 kilometers, so it's like 400 miles in American. It works great. So just want to say a big shout out to the guys at FDF. They make quality parts, they are excellent human beings, and it is a fantastic company. That is going to do it for this episode of Steve Does Stuff, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you very much. We'll see you next time.